Terry Ramadhani, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
As great as can be.
Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you very much.
You're in the hot seat this morning.
So I am.
So you are. Terry Ramadhani is the still brand spanking new CEO of KEMSA. And if you're wondering what KEMSA is this morning, then I'm not quite sure how I can help you. But the Kenya Medical Supplies
Authority.
I was going to say association, but the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, KEMSA, with us in the studio this morning. And we say brand new, Terry, because it's been a couple of months, hasn't it?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's been quite a journey. You know, it's been quite rewarding actually. You know, because you find that a lot of what were already, you know, formative thoughts and plans, you get an opportunity to, you know, set it going.
And so before you came into there was all the hullabaloo. There was sending people home. There was people who had been taken to court. There were appointments and acting and such. How then did you come into this position and then now start to kick things off?
So perhaps to take a step back. Last year, when the new board was appointed, the board that was supposed to come and, you know, sort of understand what was happening with the institution, there was a lot that became apparent. And to sort of cluster it into buckets, you know, there was a financial crisis, there was a procurement crisis, there was distribution crisis, a HR crisis, you know, every area that, you know, was looked at had some issues. And it was important. It was important to sort of start to figure out what to do about all those issues that were there. So what you saw in the media in terms of the court cases, in terms of the asking staff to work from home, in terms of giving the notices of redundancies and whatnot, came out of the initial understanding of what was ailing the institution. And after, you know, all that, and after all is said and done, you know, we must not forget that we had a lot of reports. We had reports from the Office of the Auditor General. We had reports from our partners like USAID, Global Fund, and others that had highlighted that there were really, really serious issues in the way things were organized around KEMSA, even pre-COVID, you know. So this was now the precipitation of what was already, you know, a problem that had been simmering in terms of how it was organized.
Right.
And so when COVID happened, you know, then the stakeholders demanding for something to be done, the voices got louder because Kenyans, you know, as the biggest stakeholders of, you know, KEMSA, demanded to see changes. And of course, so the first job was to look to try and understand. So then when you see all what you've called the hullabaloo, that was the response to the disruptions that were happening to try and understand and get to the bottom of what the problems were.
I mean, and I think, you know, with good reason, because we're looking at an entire public health sector that is dependent on the authority to be able to provide the much needed medical supplies.
Absolutely.
And for whatever reason, if that is not happening, then, you know, it's going to be an eyebrow raising moment and folks are going to want to know exactly what is going on.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, having done the investigation, having done, you know, the sitting back and looking, what ails KEMSA today? Because even before this whole COVID debacle of KEMSA billionaires and et cetera, there was a problem. So from where you sit today, what ails KEMSA?
I think fundamentally, you know, the systems in KEMSA have been a big problem because before you even talk about the people, you have to appreciate, you know, that systems and processes are what drive people change, you know. So the systems in place really were not able to have the end-to-end visibility that allows for, you know, appropriate decision making, timely and all that. The processes also, you know, were not necessarily best practice for a global institution that KEMSA aspires to be. And so, yes, in the end, you know, then you see the kind of inefficiencies that have been seen. So those are the critical areas that we are looking at addressing, including then the people reform, the structural reform. Several years ago, about 2012, the staff establishment was approved at 341. And the institution had been allowed to grow to more than 900 jobs that were way above the establishment. So that means that it was growing, quite in a manner that was disorganized, because then the structures were not put in place to support the kind of growth the institution had gone through over the many years. So a lot of this is now, setting a lot of that back to basics and figuring out, what are the best systems, what are the best processes, what is the best this and what's the best that. And a lot of those decisions, particularly the ones on people, have been made because we got new instruments last year which approved the staff establishment to 378. So the job that I've been doing the last 2 months is actually executing that new structure. And that is a process in itself, which is well articulated in the Employment Act, Section 40.
When you say the organization grew, what exactly happened? What is it that were the tenets that one could refer to as the hallmarks of this growth?
Well, you can certainly look at the number of employees going triple-fold, and if you have an establishment that is designed for 340 something, and then you've grown this establishment to over 900, then obviously you don't have the appropriate structures even for span of control,
You see, what I ask is this. Are we saying that when KEMSA was set up and the mandate was created, the actual day-to-day work that it was doing remained constant?
Yes.
Or did the actual demands for more services from KEMSA increase? And if it increased, what I'm asking is, why was it not envisioned that this would, of necessity, necessitate the employment of more people? But on the other hand, if that didn't happen, then there really would have been no need to employ more people.
That is exactly what we found, that there was no need to employ all those numbers that were employed, because the mandate of KEMSA, which is primarily, procurement, warehousing, and distribution, according to the KEMSA Act, the stakeholders that we had, the facilities that we had, remained the same facilities. The 11,000 plus facilities across the country. There hasn't been much change in terms of the breadth of those facilities. So the growth in people numbers was really not something that one can say was justifiable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was justification in asking these individuals to go home. Were they then deemed to be redundant?
No.
And what job were they then carrying out before they were asked to go home? Because, there were people who... look, at the time when they were asked to go home, it was the time when the court cases were in the public arena, and there was a linkage between what they could have been doing involved in these processes, where you had people who were cleaners, you had people who were support staff, who had no idea from where they were coming, what was going on. And they were asked to go home. So was it that they were not fulfilling a role? Was it that they were redundant? Was it that they were their jobs were duplicitous in nature? What exactly were we looking at?
In this country, Kenya?
Well, let her answer.
Go ahead.
Did you want to help me?
Well, I wanted to ask Ndu that just last week and the week before that, we were discussing some of the issues that the Kenya Prison Services have been undergoing, and the people at the heart of it, one of them was a cleaner. So what I'm asking is, yes, what she's saying on the surface seems to be absolutely accurate, but in an organization, a government organization is that one, it is highly unlikely that people who work there don't know what's going on. It doesn't matter what their station is. That's what I'm trying to say.
The number of people that we saw go home, the reason that was given as to why they were going home, what is it?
So, first of all, some setting facts right, because I think we get lost in the different things that happen, and sometimes it's you're not we don't communicate enough, perhaps I should say, to be able to get everybody to understand what the process looks like. So in November, and it was November the 4th, I do remember, the board made an announcement that we were issuing a notice of redundancy.
Yes.
Okay? What that is, according to the Section 40 of the Employment Act, is that at any point an institution anticipates that they need to make certain changes that may impact on jobs. Your first obligation and duty is to inform the staff. So the letter that went out on the 4th of November said just that, that it's a notice for redundancy, that the institution needs to look critically at what is ailing it, the structures around it. We have new instruments that have been put together following the audits and the reviews that had been happening months prior, and it may result into some job losses. So that's one. So up to date, nobody has lost a job in KEMSA. Number two, employees were asked to work from home, those that were deemed not to be in critical functions, so that we only had a minimum number of people to conduct the business necessary in KEMSA, as we were anticipating to now roll out the process of engagement for restructuring.
Okay.
Yes.
So where are we now in terms of that process for
So
restructuring?
we still have a lot of our employees working from home. That is number one. Remember, we're almost triple. So the institution is running with quite a lot of our staff working from home, which is evident that it was clearly very overstaffed. Number two, after the court stopped the engagement process because ex parte orders were issued in November, asking the management and the board to cease from having any conversations on the redundancies and whatnot. That matter was prosecuted in court until May, when a judgment was issued on the matter that allowed the management and the board to proceed with restructuring. Now, in May, I'd been hired as the CEO, so my first mandate was to execute the structure. Okay, so the last 2 months we have completed the mandatory engagement period, which the law stipulates cannot be less than 30 days, where you meet all the staff, you explain to them the reasons, why we must have a different look at how we do business, the case for change.
Yes.
And then explain what the future is likely to look like, and explain that those who are affected or may get impacted, what will they take away from this process? So that concluded about 2 weeks ago. Last week we had a global conference with all our people in Kenya virtually, and we now issued the next steps, where we have honestly embarked on the recruitment process. The first jobs for the new structure are already posted on our website and will be going out in other media channels. Yeah.
Okay. One of the issues has been, yesterday we had here with us the Director of Health, the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Uma Oluga. And one of the things talked about was, look, we owed all this chunk of money to KEMSA. We still have our budgets. We're trying to, whittle down our debt to KEMSA.
Yeah.
But at the same time, supplies sometimes are an issue.
Yeah.
So what really was the issue, or what is the issue behind the one body that is responsible for sending these medical supplies to the entire public sector for health?
Yes.
What is the issue with supply? Not getting enough, not being able to service it because of not enough funding, in terms of external suppliers not having. What is wrong?
Many things are wrong. So when we talked about the buckets of the issues that we found, remember I talked about distribution crisis, we talked about the financial crisis, the procurement chaos, that the audits revealed, the HR chaos. Now, specifically, and this is on a very high level, because it's all the matters, every activity that happens in the institution is an input for the next activity, So if your procurement is not working as well, then your distribution is also going to fail. If your finances are not working as well, then your procurement, your distribution, the entire chain fails. So when we talk about capture, whether it's by distributors or suppliers or staff, all those, are real in that institution as well. So you have products that have been bought that are non-essential, that fill a lot of our warehouses, but are not the products that the public needs, that the public health facilities need, you know? So looking at all that and trying to set things right means that we will have to ensure that we refocus on the critical items that we must have in stock, and then have plans on what to do with all the non-critical items that we have as dead stock. You know, we've talked about the dead stock that we have found, you know, in KEMSA,
Yes.
which is worth a lot of money, you know. So if you have money tied in dead stock, you have no money to buy the critical items, right?
What exactly is dead stock?
I wanted to point to that, CT, because as you speak of dead stock, we also heard a story after November that a lot of the PPEs were sitting in warehouses somewhere. This came also in a joint statement from the Ministry of Health to tell us that you had, I believe it was in the millions, if we're going to now transfer it to shillings, of the PPEs that were sitting there, and it could not be translated to money. And CT was of the opinion that, is it actually there?
Yeah.
Well, I actually questioned the physical evidence relating to the fact that you're told they were there doesn't mean they were there. It just means you've been told. And then they followed, some of them had expired. So they were destroyed. And I said, really? Who saw the destruction taking place, and who determined that the figures that were being given were the actual figures of what was there, if indeed they were there?
I can assure you that the PPEs that were reported to have been there at that point were there in the warehouses.
You saw them yourself?
Oh, yes. You know, at that point,
You counted them yourself?
I didn't count them, but they were there, and the records had them. But I do need to clarify something. You know, when the whole, issues around the PPEs came up about 2 years ago, there was directions from the EACC that there must not be any more movement of those particular items.
Yes.
And it took a long time for that matter to now be said, okay, we have satisfied ourselves, we know what the numbers are, we have samples for evidence for, whatever future actions they may need to do or whatever. And now you can continue with the business of what it is you are doing with these PPEs. So that then meant that we had a whole period where they could not move. But they started moving, and I actually think that we're almost done. Some of the items are actually out now. We've distributed them.
I'm inclined to believe you, simply because my reading tells me that you have worked for a long time in monitoring and evaluation, and you work for the Presidential Delivery Unit.
I did.
Now, that's a fairly serious unit as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But something that I want to ask, it borders on a personal question. Yes, you beat a slew of individuals who wanted this same job.
Yeah.
But why take on this job, which by its very nature is a landmine? Not a job, a landmine, just waiting to go off at any moment in time.
Yeah.
Were you given guarantees that perhaps previous CEOs were not given? Were you, is it possible that you're given tenure? The reason why I ask is because everything that we see about KEMSA, it isn't that KEMSA is the problem, but the interests around KEMSA.
Yes.
And in the absence of guarantees, the headwinds that you're likely to face are some of the strongest headwinds that anybody in this country can face, because they'll be political, there'll be this, and there'll be the other.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, you're spot on. Even when I decided to apply for the role, and I was consulting some of my close friends, they did indicate the same sentiments to me. But here's the thing, CT. When I worked in the President's Delivery Unit, and you have a whole understanding of just how broad and wide, the business of delivery of services by government is, and that despite everything that we read in the papers, there are actually people who burn the midnight oil in government to try and deliver services to the people, and you then, sit, on a board of a very, very important institution like KEMSA, and you're deeply involved in trying to figure out, united in purpose in that board, trying to figure out how do we fix these problems, and you get to the point where you actually have a very deep conversation with yourself that the work that we have done in the board all these months, if I do not apply for this job, I'll be doing a disservice to myself too, because I'm now very vested, that there's something that can be done. So fortunately, when I applied for the job, I got the role. I was, there were moments of, trepidation, wondering, well, actually, what have I done? Because I've been in private sector and I've been shielded from having to, interact and get the kind of exposure that this kind of jobs and indeed the kind of risks. But the question that I ask myself, and I've always asked myself as a Kenyan, when these moments to do what our country needs for us come, and we say no, because it's too dangerous, it's too risky, then who does it? Because everybody then is in self-preservation. I don't want to leave private sector because. I don't want to go into this area because. I had spent so much time in the board trying to figure out what were the problems in KEMSA, which is why I really understand what it is that is ailing the institution, because that's what we were doing in the board. So for me, it would be a lot of personal gratification to see traction of some of the plans, that we had put together take off. Then I can go on and do other things.
Oh, interesting. As we continue this conversation this morning, we are with the CEO of KEMSA, Terry Ramadhani, and we're discussing, reforms at KEMSA, taking on a new lease of life, perhaps, and the conversation continues.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Kenya's biggest conversation continues, and this morning we're talking with KEMSA CEO Terry Ramadhani, and we're looking at reforms at KEMSA, taking on this. It's interesting because you're in the hot seat here, and you're in the hot seat there as well. So I guess this is good territory for you, isn't it?
Good practice.
Indeed, it is. All right, so reforms at KEMSA, even with the issues that have been faced by the authority over the last, 5 odd years or so, and then looking into the future, what has been done that would showcase that KEMSA as an authority then is able to handle the gargantuan responsibility that lies on its shoulders?
Excellent. I'm really happy that you've asked that to do, because now we start to talk about what the future of KEMSA looks like. I think it's important also at this point to highlight the fact that His Excellency the President has been very, very clear about how important the health agenda has been to him. And UHC has been something that, has been cried out for across the world, and particularly in this part of the continent. And there cannot be UHC without KEMSA. So the reforms that he pronounced himself to that are happening in KEMSA are being pushed through with 100% government support, 100% government support at all quarters, be it the ministry, be it all the other agencies that are supporting the agenda of making sure that this institution stands up and does what it is designed to do. As you have said, it's a huge job, So we have the structural issues that are being addressed. We have the process issues that are being addressed. We have the strategy of moving it forward. So all the pieces are coming together. So what do we anticipate to see? I can tell you of some critical milestones. We're currently rebuilding the ERP system in-house, and we'll be testing it from October.
Explain what an ERP system is,
Enterprise
please.
Resource Planning. So it is the system that is going to allow us to have the much desired end-to-end visibility. That as I sit in the CEO's office and I'm approving something for procurement, the budget has been ticked off. The money itself, the exchequer, is available, and indeed that item has been ordered for and is required in a particular area, so that we walk away from this area or from this whole scenario of having items that nobody requires, but we have bought them, So being able to see end to end also means that you have better stocks visibility. When the stocks are going down, you're able to replenish so you don't have stockouts. When expiries are coming up and, short expiry commodities, you know which ones need to be pushed out so that you actually have, only products that have long expiries, that are fit for use, that are the quality you desire and are needed, by the masses. Really, what this breaks down to, the story about KEMSA and what I'd like Kenyans to remember, what it breaks down to is that we're in the business of saving lives. And there is no life that is going to wait when one is sick for medications to come from India, from wherever. We must get to a point where we have the critical medications, the tracer items here, the Class A drugs with us, and enough stocks for us to be able to turn around critical and emergency needs in 1 day, 5 days to the tertiary hospitals, and 7 days to public health, to primary health facilities, because it's important that we are responsive for the impact of what the institution does to be felt on the ground. And yes, we have been very open and very transparent about the problems that the institution has had. Ours is the job to put it together and drive it to higher heights, and it continues to thrive, because that institution is for Kenya. It's not for an individual. I'm there for a time and a purpose, doing what I need to do. And then somebody else will also, I'm sure, come and take it forward. But so far, the last year, even despite the crises that we've still been managing, we managed to deliver 27 billion worth of essential commodities across the country. We managed to unlock 2.7 billion of funds that were locked in debt, particularly with the counties. Yes. We managed to deliver 1.3 billion worth of commodities to our counties that are affected by drought, and we continue to give those services. We have actually, in the last 2 months, been able to turn around county orders in 5 days, coming from last year where we were turning around orders in over 40 days. There's been huge marked improvements in terms of the reforms that we are putting in place. Last year, we had an order fill rate of 18%. Now, an order fill rate, I'll explain what that means, is that for every 100 items that a county procures from us, the number of items we have is the order fill rate. So when we say 18%, it means that for every 100 items, we can only provide 18. Right? And this is the institution that should be able to provide. Now, world best practices should be 95, 97%. So that is how badly, it was doing. Now, I'm happy to say our order fill rate is at 50%, and we are looking to push it to at least 70% by the end of the year.
Can I ask,
Yes.
what direct intervention then made it possible for the order fill rate then to go from 18% to 50%? And in such a short time.
Deliberate moves, process re-engineering, how the warehouse operates in terms of being able to get items from storage into staging, into packing it up and figuring out what staging is, when you bring all the boxes of medication out and you stage them on the pallets so that it makes it easy to have the picking done.
This is done by human beings.
Yes, it's done by human beings.
It seems to me as though it will be a really simple process of moving things from a warehouse to a belt, to a box, to a vehicle. It seems to me as though that would be something really simple.
That is the future of KEMSA that I'm shortly going to talk about, because I want to tell you about our national supply center that we have commissioned. We have started to use in Embakasi, which has provision for conveyor belts.
One of the things that you said was really interesting is that understanding the problem then gives you insights into how to then figure out the solution.
Yes.
So then, again, I'm at this turn rate. What did you call it?
Order fill rate.
Order fill rate.
Yes.
Still sticking on that, because again, it is one of the vital components of distribution for you as KEMSA.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to repeat, what exactly happened
Yeah.
for you to get from 18 to 50?
Yes.
And is it a repetition of the same that will get you from 50 to 95%, which is a global standard?
Absolutely. So number one, I talked about process reengineering,
Yeah.
which, for example, is the reorganization of the warehouse, which is what I'm talking about. You know, the warehouses that hold our commodities, the current one holds over 7,000 pallets. It's huge. The next one, the new one, has a capacity of over 11,000 pallets. So ensuring that it is properly organized to get the right flow is critical in turnaround time. That's number one, even if you had mechanized. Number two is putting resources, however, troubling the financial elements are, into buying the products that are critical, because those are the products that are often ordered.
Right.
Because the 18%, forget about how the warehouse is organized and the flows and whatnot. But if those products are not in the warehouse, no matter how organized it is, you still won't be able to deliver them. So there's that financial element of actually putting money into the products that are needed. So, the critical items, the tracer items, and the Class A drugs, right? Because those are the most common. Now, when we say tracer items, we have a whole list of essential commodities. But out of that list, there are 61 commodities that have been lifted as these are the ones that when you do your M&E, will tell you that the system is working, because you should find these items in the facilities, because you must pick certain places to have indicators. Then when you look, for example, at the procurement reengineering, the long lead times of getting the commodities in has also been re-engineered. And we are continuing to fine-tune all those processes so that it becomes seamless, that when the order comes from the county, as soon as it comes in and the verification happens and whatnot, it is pushed through to supply chain and the buying happens. And the buying has to happen in such a manner that we are not going to be taking 6 months because the first 3 months, some mistake happened somewhere and the tender ended up being unresponsive, which means you have another 3 months to wait to carry out the same process,
Which brings me to the
Yeah.
question that concerns me, beginning with the ERP.
Yeah.
All these processes involve human beings.
Yes.
You have been an HR practitioner.
Yeah.
Now, what is it that the current board and your administration are doing to ensure that the human element, which is usually the fly in the ointment when it comes to all these things, good system, good plans, we see to the Ministry of Education, things that you didn't think would happen, but the human element comes in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right?
That's the crux of the matter. Remember when we've been talking about the restructuring,
Yes.
right? Every person within the institution is required to reapply for their jobs and go through a very robust process of interviewing and matching the skills to the new jobs in the new structure, but also ensuring that we have the right people in the right spaces. That everybody who we are carrying into the new structure is fully competent, motivated for the right reasons to do the job they need to do. That's number one. Number two, the new ERP that's being built has features that will allow us to be able to track activity across the entire ERP, because that brings you to the point of accountability. Number three, just yesterday, we had an event to launch our new vision and strategy, as well as our KEMSA service teams, who are the champions of the changes that we are trying to make. And one of the things we were discussing was, once the new structure has been embedded, we will sit together with everybody in that new structure, do something very important, which is co-create the values that are going to hold us accountable to each other, that we will hold each other accountable to. Because ultimately, it's about human behavior. And you can't enforce human behavior on values that people don't buy into. So we are going to sit down and agree. This KEMSA 2.2, what are the rules of engagement that we are going to hold ourselves to? What are the processes and procedures that we have all agreed to? So that then everybody signs off a performance contract. because that's where you start to drive accountability, and being able to have an end-to-end visibility even with the new structure. It means that you have a single source of who owns the inventory internally at any one time. So commodities have short expiries. There's somebody to respond. Why did we accept this? Commodities are expiring. There's somebody to respond. Why are they expiring? What have we not done right? Where is the bottleneck? Commodities are going off because they're supposed to be in the cold chain and perhaps they were not handled or transported properly. Why? You know how they should. So those very clear lines, because in this old structure that we had, the duplicity of roles, the lack of accountability, there was no way you could drive it, because I like to say this when we engage with staff, that we have a staff member who's called I don't know. And that staff member is notorious because every question you ask is put on the I don't know staff member, who never has a face or a shape or a form.
But they're really responsible for quite a lot.
Oh, yes. Everything that goes wrong is that staff member I don't know. So we must move away from this I don't know to particulars that, do you're responsible for this, and this is what we are holding you accountable to. These are the standards we have agreed it will be at. You have signed off.
So it's going to ruffle quite a number of feathers,
but of
isn't
course.
it?
But
Because
of
we're looking
course.
at the human element playing
But
out
of
here.
course.
And it's
Yeah.
going to, it contributes significantly to either failure or
Yes.
success
Absolutely.
of any
Absolutely.
organization.
Absolutely.
So you're going to come in and ruffle some feathers here, Terry. You've already started.
Yeah.
You've already
Yeah.
started ruffling
Yes.
these
Yeah.
feathers.
Yeah.
And we're looking at, what could have previously been a situation where government, unfortunately, is used to, taking a lackadaisical approach
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So we're saying that things are going to change. And the question is, are you in it for the long haul when it comes to making sure that these things actually meet the master?
I'm here. I have been here. The fact that I made the decision to leave private sector, where I'm well shielded and I have a very, private, cushy existence, to having to, be in this space where I have to actually address stakeholders and speak to, my fellow countrymen and say, hey, yes, this institution is in a crisis, but we are trying to put it together. I would like to see this as the reason, my what I will leave behind.
Tell us what it is that you've planned to ensure that this thing actually works the way.
So we have a three-pronged approach. We decided we needed to focus on three simple things, because you don't want to talk about 50-odd things that you're never going to have time to focus on or deliver. Our three key things that we want to deliver is, one, operational excellence. Now, operational excellence touches on many things. It touches on systems, it touches on people, it touches on processes. So we have, for example, partnerships with Kaizen, and we've been working with Kaizen for quite some time. Now, Kaizen is an institute that, talks about the Japanese principles of ensuring that, you are following the 5 S's. And this is very popular, particularly in the logistics world, where you have to set, sort, standardize, shine, and all the rest of it. And then we are working with partners who are also helping us bring best-in-class practices and best-in-class methodologies to ensuring that our processes work right. Our human piece is what we are currently dealing with right now in terms of the restructuring. The second thing that is very important to us is customer focus, the customer service. KEMSA, as we know of it, I don't think there's any of us in Kenya who would say that they feel that KEMSA is focused on serving, So we have to reorient the institution. And our new clarion call, which, by the way, we launched yesterday, Here to Serve, we have to remind KEMSA why KEMSA exists. And KEMSA doesn't exist for KEMSA's end. KEMSA exists to serve. So we must be responsive to the needs of those that we are serving, be it our stakeholders who are county governments, the citizens who are using our products, our partners in terms of the donors, etc., etc. The third most critical thing, and this one I'm sure the two of you will really understand, because you do a lot of it even as a media house, is repositioning. We must move away from the narratives that keep making KEMSA look very bad. But it's not going to be done by storytelling. It's going to be done by the action being felt on the ground, and the story changing from the service user perspective, because that then gives us the impetus to be able to say, hey, we have taken a corner. We have taken a different direction. We are listening to you. We want to serve you. We want to do what is best for the citizen, for the patient.
Yeah. Even as you look at those relationships, and one of the stakeholders that really is highly important are the 47 counties. Counties rely on KEMSA heavily to be able to then stock, the medical facilities, right?
Absolutely.
How has that relationship been? And then what is important to make sure that relationship progresses to the point whereby they're now trusting, because I can imagine that it has been sticky. They're now trusting, the new 2.2 KEMSA that is here to serve, 2.0 KEMSA that is here to serve.
We had 1.0, now we are 2.0.
2.0.
The slippery thing about trust is that it takes a long time to build, and then it just crashes.
Takes a minute to crush.
Yeah. And yes, we have lost credibility in many quarters, and we must be forthright and admit that, yes, some things have gone on in the institution that shouldn't have gone on and have cost us critical relationships. And the onus is on us to rebuild them. So our engagements with the county have been continuous. We have visited the county governments. We have visited the county executives for health. I have personally engaged the county executives for health in their forums. We have engaged several governors. We really celebrate a lot of county governments that have stood firm with us even through our challenges and have been instrumental in trying to help us fix the challenges. We have been appealing to the counties that have not honored their debts to do so, because the service delivery debt triad is very clearly connected. I'm not able to stock what it is they need if I don't have them to pay for what it is we've supplied them, So that's a conversation and an engagement we continue to do through the COG, And I have to say, counties have been extremely supportive. I know there's been challenges, but I know that they know that we are working very hard to fix those challenges because we've been communicating the same messages.
But KEMSA hasn't always had this negative reputation that we speak of.
Thank you.
Because, I know because I have experienced the efficiencies of KEMSA. Those who worked in the HIV and AIDS field relied entirely on what KEMSA did.
Yeah.
And if you only need to look at the success of the initiatives and the processes to tell you that KEMSA played a very important role in achieving that particular success.
Absolutely.
Yes. So somewhere along the line, we lost the meter.
Right.
And that's exactly why, the importance of us remembering who KEMSA is so important, to the institution and to those who work there, that we are here to serve. You are very right. The institution has done it before, has been. And, even as much as, we are living the pain of just what we see as a broken institution, we have to remember as Kenyans that this institution is a diamond in the rough for now. The achievements it's had in the past, and indeed its capacity in Central, Eastern, Sub-Saharan Africa. We don't have another one of this kind of institution. So it behooves us to really invest, as His Excellency has been pushing to invest in the health sector, to get it where it ought to be. Because the benefits that this institution can give this country, or indeed even the region, particularly if we are to learn lessons from what was going on with COVID, is enormous. But we must start from the basics. We must get the basics right.
Our time is almost up. But just in a sentence, what are you doing to repair the relationships with the partners?
I must thank our partners. I must start from thanking them because they have really stood with us. And I must, I'd be remiss not to, acknowledge that we have partners who really stood with us throughout this journey and are committed to seeing KEMSA get back to where it should be and surpass that, because they too understand that even the programs that we run, which by the way, we continue to do so on their behalf, particularly the ones you mentioned for HIV and whatnot, are important and are continuing. So we have been engaging and we will continue to do so to ensure we get back where we need to be.
Terry Ramadhani, the CEO of KEMSA, thank you for joining us this morning. And it would be nice to see where KEMSA is in a short time. Asante sana.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.